Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Today I want to walk you through Open Props, which is a new CSS framework that's built entirely on CSS custom properties. I want to go over what Open Props is, why you might choose to use it, especially over something like Tailwind or Bootstrap, and then how to actually install it and get it running in a real-life project. We're going to use the PostCSS just-in-time plugin so that we only render the props we actually use in production. All right, let's jump right in. Well, first of all, what is Open Props? I think the most helpful way for me to think about it is it's kind of two things. Number one, it's just CSS variables that you add to your standard CSS. But the nice thing is it gives you a design system and structure and scaling so that everything looks like it belongs. Maybe the easiest way to show this off is with the typography props. So you can see here that what we've got is a type scale system set up for us already, and it's built in to Open Props. So you're not having to come up with your own type scaling. Here it is ready for you to use, and you're just adding it to your normal CSS. As you can see along the bottom here, you've got things for colors and gradients and shadows and easing and a bunch of other things, and there's way more that's being planned on top of everything that's already here. In fact, if you come up, let's see, this way right here, here are some other ones that are hopefully coming soon. You see lists and counters and variable fonts and a bunch of other really neat things. The second thing Open Props is it's an opinionated default. And you don't have to use this second part. In fact, I'm not going to in the project. I'm going to show you here in a second, but it's this normalized. Now let me open this code pin here. And if I come back over this way, you can see that I've got not just Open Props, but also their normalized style sheet. Now this normalized is essentially a super opinionated default. Over here, there's no classes. Over here, there's nothing being referenced in the CSS. But as you scroll, everything looks really styled super nicely. And that's all based off of this normalize. So it adds a bunch of default stylings to things like bold or italics or these marked through lines. All of this is just done with their default. In fact, if you want me to prove that, I'll just comment this out. And you can see that suddenly this page looks dreadful, all right, because it's just plain HTML. But just with this normalize, it gives you a very opinionated default. Now that default isn't only a light mode, it actually includes dark mode by default as well. You can see there if I change my system to dark mode, it looks cool. Now over here, because the way that they've set this whole thing up, it's really smart. You can override any of these defaults whenever you want to. So for instance, I could grab all my paragraph tags and say I want the color to be something like blue. In building out their system, they've set a really low specificity. In fact, they've used the where selector a lot, so it has 0 specificity, which means you can pretty quickly override anything you want and you're not resorting to adding like important flags or whatever. Now, you can also use open props in here as well. So I could say color, and then one of those open props is like a blue 4 or something like that. And now that takes on their own custom blue color all the way in any of those paragraph tags on the page. So what is Open Props? It's CSS variables that you can add to normal CSS, and it's also an opinionated default if you want to use their normalized package. Now, why might you choose to use it? If I come back over here, I think there are a couple reasons why you might use Open Props over something like Tailwind or Bootstrap. Now, I understand the appeal of Tailwind and Bootstrap, but I don't know about you, but I just hate dependencies. Whenever I can get rid of them, I do. And modern CSS is so good that it's oftentimes much easier to get what you want if you know how to write CSS, and then you're not messing with having to learn another system on top of CSS itself. So I think you'd want to use Open Props if you like writing your own CSS, but you just want some help with the basic design structure for like typography and colors and gradients and shadows. And if you use the PostCSS plugin that I'm going to show you, then you don't have to have everything loaded on your page. You just load in the props that you actually use and leave the rest of them alone. I think the other reason you'd use Open Props is if you really wanted that opinionated default without any work at all. Now, while Bootstrap is easy and Tailwind is easy, nothing is quite as easy as literally just loading in a normalized script and everything working for you automatically. So that's what it is. That's why you might use it. Now let me show you how to actually install it. If I come back down this way, you can see there's several options or ways to install it. You can just grab a CDN link, so you can just link this directly in your HTML or in your CSS, and it will work for you automatically. You can also load this through npm. And then in very much the same way, you would just install it or import it into your CSS or JavaScript or whatever. If you really want to get wild and crazy, you can build out your own, grabbing the CLI command and cloning the repo yourself and customizing it however you want. Now, all these are helpful, but they actually load in every single CSS prop by default. In fact, if I go ahead and look at this page and we come down here, you can see here are all of the props that are being loaded by default because it seems like they're using one of these, or maybe they're just using every single prop anyhow because, well, they're showing off every prop on the page. So either way, you can see all these would be loaded if you used any of those options I've shown you already. What we want to do is I want to show you how to use this PostCSS just-in-time props. And as you can see here, you ship only the props you actually use. Let's click here to learn more. And one just note here is that it does require you to use PostCSS. PostCSS essentially is kind of like a part of your build process that will take your CSS and do certain things to it. So like a really popular one, and one that you probably should use on any site you're using, would be some kind of auto prefixer. Whether you use PostCSS or some other build tool to get this basically allows you to have backwards compatible CSS that you're writing. PostCSS also looks the other way. You can actually add a plugin that lets you use new CSS that isn't yet quite in all the modern browsers. Now, we're not going to use either of those this time. We're just going to use the PostCSS just-in-time props, and that will give us access to all of these props, but it'll do so in a way where it only actually loads the props we actually end up writing in our CSS. Now, if I come back up here to the PostCSS, they're going to give you some setup, and you can see here that they say you need to add PostCSS extensions for whatever your build tool is, and then add plugins. Well, we already know what our plugin is going to be, so let's figure out what build tool we're going to use. If you scroll through here, you've got CSS and JS, you've got Parcel, you've got Webpack, you've got Gulp, you've got NPM scripts, you've got whatever you want. I'm actually going to use something called Vite, and Vite is kind of a next generation build tool. It's a lot like Parcel. There are definitely differences to it, but it's really quick, and so that's why I wanted to use it today. So here I've got a local terminal pulled up. I'm just going to type npm create Vite at latest. It's going to ask me for a project name. Let's call this Open Props. We'll just use vanilla JavaScript. We're not even going to use JavaScript, so that should work. And then I'm going to cd into Open Props and npm install. And I told you it was fast. So we've got Vite up and running. Now what we need to do is actually add in PostCSS and all of those plugins. So we will install PostCSS. Then we'll also need PostCSS just-in-time props. And I think we actually might need Open Props as well. If I remember correctly, it uses that. I could be wrong there. Now we're going to need one config file. So let's go ahead and just create that while we're here. So we'll do touch postcss.config.js. All right, now finally, let's open this up in VS Code. All right, and here we are. And here's this PostCSS config file, and we need to add something in here. Let's come back over this way, and let's see, down here, we're just going to copy all of this right here and add it to that file we created, the postcss.config.js. There it is. Let's save it. And then I'm going to go ahead and come in here locally in this terminal and type npm run dev, because Vite gives me this dev script automatically when you create the project. You can see here I've got Vite pulled in. That's obviously my build tool. And then whatever build tool you will need these as well. That way you can actually reference PostCSS and this Open Props. You'll also need this PostCSS config file. And depending on your build tool, you might have to name this a little bit differently or style it differently. But I'll leave that up to your build tool to explain. All right, it's got it open on port 3000, and there it is. And it's a very basic Vite site for us. Let me save that, and then just to kind of talk you through how Vite sets this up originally, it pulls everything in through this main.js file, and this main.js file imports my style sheet. So let's go ahead and just make sure that this is working. Let's set the background color here to like our var of blue 4 or something like that. Okay, so it is actually pulling in those props, and if I were to inspect this, the thing we want to see is that it's only pulling in the exact props we're using, and you can see that's exactly what it's doing. So that's the power of using just-in-time rather than just installing open props on your entire project. It would have to load all the open props even if you weren't using them. All right, let's shut that down, and then let's go ahead and get rid of this. And I'm going to come over here to my HTML, and we're going to just strip out all of this. And I'm going to paste in my own HTML. There's nothing special in here. Let's come over here. You can see, let's see, I've got just the normal head tag. I've actually linked it directly to the style sheet. We'll just bypass that main.js file. We've got a header. We've got sections here. We've got a section 1 and a section 2 inside of a main tag. They're pretty basic. And then really the only things I'm using for styling are these classes here. Obviously, you can just structure your HTML however you want because Open Props is only adjusting your CSS. All right, now before we do anything else, I want to show you one other thing that will make it way easier to write Open Props. If we come back over this way, just below here, they're going to show you that you can actually use an autocomplete option in VS Code. And it uses this extension called CSS Var complete. And basically what it allows you to do is to add the Open Props as options when you're typing in VS Code. So it autocompletes for you. So I need to install that extension, and then we're going to go ahead and paste this in. Let's see, just right here. This is saying this would be my only settings, and I already have settings. So I'm just going to add this onto the end of my settings file after I install that extension. So let's come over here. I'm going to open up the extensions and let's look for CSS Var complete. And there it is. Let's install it. Then I'll come over here and open up my settings, Command-Shift-P and settings. And then go ahead and click on this little thing right here. And let's scroll back down to the bottom. And then I'm just going to add this in. All right, let's close the sidebar. If I did that correctly, I should be able to come in here and set like the background color to something like Var. And then now I see all of these open props showing up for me automatically. So like here are the different blue color options. All right, cool. So we've got that all set up and running. Now, before we do too much, let's go ahead. I'm just going to paste in a basic clear. And then let's jump over to the open props documentation to kind of show you some options we've got. So let me show you a few things. Let's talk about, first of all, about colors. I just showed you one of those, the blue color. You can see there's a bunch of options there, and if you want to see what they look like, here they are with some nice animations. Now you can use these colors as text colors or as background colors, whatever you might like. We've also got gradients. I can click or just scroll down, I guess, a little bit here as well. You've got 30 gradients that are there by default, and they actually use the colors to set these up. So you can see here a bunch of different gradients. I think we're going to end up using this number 7 one, but you could use all of these different colors if you want in your project. And then next, before we start writing some CSS, let me show you this typography again. I mentioned this a little bit ago, but you can see we've got basic font sizes. We've got actually fluid font sizes that will scale with your screen size, font weights, letter spacings, and line heights. And the nice thing is not only do they give you that, but they also give you font families. So you can use font sans, for instance, and your whole site will take on these font families. If you scroll down here, they actually give you the option to see what these look like in real time. So you can actually scale these and see what they look like. I do wish they actually showed you the number you were on, but I'm sure there's some way to see that if you were to inspect it. All right, here's letter spacing as well, and you can see line height, how that might adjust. And then again, you've got that font scaling that's real nice as a default. And then if you actually want to use these clamped properties, they will scale with you as the screen moves. So on your small screen size, for instance, this would be 2 rem, would be the smallest this font would ever get, and it would get all the way up to 3.5 rem. All right, let's actually start styling this thing out. So let's grab our body. We're going to first of all set the font family, and you guessed it, we're going to set it to our font sans. And then we can take our font size and we can set that to our font size fluid. Let's use our fluid 1. So it gets 1 at the smallest, and I think it's like 1.25 or 1.5 at the largest screen sizes. We can also set our line height. And again, this extension is a super big help to see exactly what these might be. Let's set the default to line height 2. It gives us a little bit more space. Now let's set the background color here to another one of those variables. Let's use our blue of 0, so it's just a slight off-white blue. And then the color for the entire site, let's set a default of gray of like 8. Now, there are dark blues, but they're not dark enough in my mind for text, so that's why I'm resorting to a blue. Now we've got a header inside here as well, so let's grab our header. And here let's set the background rather than the background color because we're going to use one of those gradients I showed you. That gradient, what did we decide? I don't remember, 7 maybe? Yeah, so there it is. And I'm going to change the color of the text here to one of those blue properties. We'll use the blue 0, same as the background. Now we're going to text align this to the center. And then for our padding, let me show you some other open props. So if I come back over this way, let's look at sizes. Very much like font sizes, here we've got both kind of static sizes and fluid sizes. Then we've also got some additional things like content and header sizes. So let me show you those. So they show you here the different sizes available to you. And these are just static on any screen size. And they've also got these fluid sizes that scale with the size of your screen. Now below here, I mentioned that they've got some extra options. So they've got reading content size. So you want to be able to wrap text in a way that's easy for people to read. So they give you 3 different options here. And then they also give you some heading content sizes. Because again, you probably wouldn't want those headings to be quite as wide as you might make your content. So let's add some sizing properties here for this padding. And again, using some kind of framework like this allows you to have more consistent styling on your site. So we'll set a fluid size 6 up and down, and then let's set a static size of size 4 left and right. So there we are, it's set like that, and if I get a little bit bigger, it actually should stack up a little bit more up and down because it's adjusting to the screen size with that clamp property. All right, next we've got our H1. Let me actually pull this down a little bit more, give us more space. And for H1, let's set the font size to our var font size fluid. And let's choose the largest fluid available, which is 2 rem all the way up to 3.5 rem, I think. So again, that will adjust with our screen size. Let's set a max inline size here of var size header 3. Now our header here isn't quite large enough, but if I were to come in here, Let's come up top. Here it is right here. And let's add like, I don't know, just random text. We need to get it beyond 30 characters, and now it should wrap at 30 characters, and that's what it's doing. Now we do need to get margin auto so it doesn't stick over to the side. Let's get rid of all that, and let's set this margin to auto. This max inline size is just a logical property. You could also do max width. That will work as well. While we're here, let's go ahead and work on our H2s as well. So let's set the font size here. Actually, let's just copy this one down right here, and we'll change this to R2. And then let's do the same thing for the 3 while we're at it. So we'll say for the font size H3 will be font size fluid 1. So now all of our headers are scaling with the size of our screen. Now here's the brilliance of custom properties. Because they're just normal custom properties, you can adjust these however you want. You might remember our body font also has the same fluid size, and I might want this card title to be slightly larger. Now there are only 3 options available, but if I come back over here to typography and let's scroll down to the font sizes right here, these fluid sizes, you can see here I've got nothing in between this 1.5 and this 1.25. So let's grab both of these. Let's copy these out. And what I can do is come in here and adjust these however I might want. So I know I want it to be something kind of between this. Let's maybe say that I want it to be something like the 1.4 or 1.5 at the smallest. Let's set this ideal to 3 view width, and then let's set this one to 2. Now let's go ahead and kill this here. And I might even want this, maybe let's make this a little bit bigger. And here, make it more like 1.6. So now it's slightly bigger, and all I've done is adjust this custom property. Now you can mess with this however you might want. I'm just going to actually delete this. That was just to show you the example. But it's just a custom property, and you can easily overwrite it locally in any scope you want to. All right, let's finish up the styling of this actual page here. Let's get a little bit more space. And I'm going to have a grid here, and then for my gap, I'm going to use one of those sizes I showed you earlier. We'll do a fluid size of 4. And inside this main tag, I've got 2 sections, so those will now separate by that fluid size. Now let's actually copy this down, and let's set a padding block of the exact same, so it looks the same way. The same is essentially up and down. It's a logical property, but the same kind of idea. Now left and right, I want the exact same thing, but let's do something a little fun here. Let's set a margin inline. I want it essentially to be auto, and I want it to cap at a certain amount. So let's use the max property. This has nothing to do with open props in particular. It's just something kind of fun to play with. But we're going to give it 2 values. So the second one will be our var size fluid of 4. And then for the first one, what we want to give it is a calculation. And in these max functions, you don't have to add calc or anything like that. You could just do calculations directly within this. So let's add another parenthesis here and do 100% minus 70 rem divided by 2. Well, that was kind of messy. Here we go, like that. And now what it's going to do is basically cap itself to that max value here, and then when it gets smaller, it's going to choose the second max value. It's choosing the largest of these 2 and adding that as the margin on the outside. So that essentially gets you the margin auto, and it gives you spacing all around. I saw this somewhere on Twitter. I don't remember where, but I used it, and then I lost the reference. So if you know who that is, feel free to drop a comment in the description noting whoever brilliantly came up with that. All right, for both of our sections, let's grab the display of grid, and then we'll do a gap var, and we'll do a fluid size 2, and then let's set everything to the middle, so margin auto, and text align center, and then we'll do a max inline size here of var size content 3. And we're using one of those content sizing to set the size of our text so it wraps kind of properly as we'd expect. Now, while I want that size to be the same for these cards, I actually want them to go a little bit wider. So let's use the same idea we used before. Let's actually grab, let's see, this ARIA labeled by section. We'll use that to style this second section. And inside here, we could, of course, set our own size content, but I can just override that property locally in this scope to size content 3. Let's set this to like 125 characters or something like that. Now, when I come over here, that gets a lot larger than the section up above because it's using its own kind of custom override of this variable I'm pulling in from open props. That leaves us just our card containers left, and that gives us an opportunity to look at a few other things. So it's card container, we'll do display flex, flex wrap of wrap, and we'll do a gap with fluid 2, and then align items to the start. Now to actually see what's going on here, let's grab our cards themselves. We'll do a flex 1, 1, and 30. Now they stack up nicely right next to each other. We'll set a padding here, and this will just be a fixed width. We'll do a size of 4. And let's get a background color so we can actually see what's going on. So let's do one of those blue options. We'll do blue, maybe like 1, so it's just slightly different than the background. And now let me show you a couple other open props I have yet to show you. So if I come over here, let's look at our borders. So again, just like a lot of the other ones, they show you everything that you've got available to you currently. So you've got border sizes, radius, you've got blobs you can do, and conditional radiuses. I won't show you those. But you can see here we've got different options. Let's choose like maybe this 3 option for the border size. And then we've got border radius options too. And again, these scale really nicely. If we wanted blobs, we've got those if we need them. So back over this way, let's use that border. We'll use our var border size, and let's use that 3. And we do want it to be solid, and then we want it to be our var blue 2. And there it is. Now to add that border radius that we looked at, we've got some options for radius, and let's choose maybe 3. Nice rounded corner there, and that all comes from open props. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the reason you'd use open props is if you really like to write your own CSS like I do, but you want some kind of design system to inform the styling of the page, so you don't have to come up with all of that every time you're doing a new project. Now let's make this a display of grid and do a gap of var size 5. Now I also want to show you the box shadow, but there's actually a problem with the PostCSS plugin. So let's first of all just look at what it is, and then I'll show you how to kind of get around it right now. So if I come in here to shadows, again, they give you really nice box shadow defaults, which is great to have so you don't have to come up with all these yourself. Who likes writing box shadows? Now, like I mentioned, there's a problem right now in the PostCSS, so the way to get around this is you need to add something that it uses to calculate these box shadows directly in your HTML. And what it uses is the shadow strength and the shadow color, and these are just the default colors that come with open props, and now this will allow us to use box shadows because it's going to use these to calculate them. So let's come back down this way. Hopefully by the time you watch this, that won't be the case, because normally what you should be able to do is just say box shadow, var shadow, and then let's choose like, I don't know, let's choose like 6 so you can definitely see it. And there you go, and it pops in. Let's go shadow 4, shadow 3, there we go. All right, on this really basic page, we've got just one thing left, and that is a button, and that will give me an option to show you one other thing, which is some animations or transitions. Let's set the text decoration, first of all, though, to none. We'll do a font size here of, let's do font size 3, and then font weight, which we haven't actually used yet. Let's use a weight here. For some reason, it thinks those are colors. That's fine. We'll use a font weight of 4. Let's set a background color so we can see what's going on here. Let's set it to a var blue of 5. And that way it's a darker blue color. And then the color itself, we can do our blue of 0. And then let's set some padding on here. We'll do a var size 2 up and down. And then we can do a fluid of 3 left and right. I'll save that, and you can see it nicely spaces out. Now let's also add a border radius here. We'll do a radius of 2. And then since we got that box shadow working, we might as well use it again. So let's do a shadow of maybe 2 this time. Yeah, let's do something more intense. How about 4? And now is the time to show you one other thing. If I come over here, I've shown you colors, gradients, shadows, aspect ratios are basically just normal aspect ratios. Typography, I showed you that. I've shown you sizes, borders. I haven't shown you z-index or media queries. Media queries only works with PostCSS, and I'll let you figure that out. You have to actually add an extra plugin, I believe, as well. I want to show you these easing functions and the animations. So you can see here they give you basically some superpowers on top of normal easing functions. And you can see them by playing them right here. So you can see they're just slightly more dramatic. Let's see, there's some fun ones like ease elastic. That's fun. You've also got like steps where it'll jump like that. So these are all just timing functions you can add to those transitions. You've also got access to animations, and I don't plan to use these in this project. Let's see, maybe I should just show you one real fast. So let's grab this. But basically, they give you these, and you can actually, again, look at them right here and play them and see what they look like. So you can see how this might be helpful for like a little toast message. You can just add a little shake to it or something like that to alert the user or whatever. All right, let's come over here. And let's jump up to maybe our card, and I'll add this animation directly here, and you can see that it slides down as soon as you load the page. All right, so you've got access to a bunch of custom animations pre-built and ready to use. What I want to show you, though, is the transition timing function. So let's transition only on the box shadow. We'll do it over like maybe 800 milliseconds, and then let's use one of those fun ones. So like ease, how about elastic 5? Then we just need to come in here with button, and let's use the is selector to grab either the hover or the focus state, and then we'll set the box shadow here to none. Now if I come over here and I hover, you can see I get that nice little timing function. It's different than anything else I might use or write up myself. I hope this was a big help to you both in understanding what OpenProps is, why people might choose to use it over something like Tailwind or Bootstrap, and then how to actually get it up and running, especially with this PostCSS configuration and that VS Code extension that makes it so much easier to write these OpenProps. Well, if you've watched all the way to the end of this video, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was a huge help. I will catch you in the next one. Happy coding.